I'm Edward Shelswell White, and welcome to the first episode in an occasional series we call The So What. This is a way for us to use actionable intelligence to explore real time issues in our industry and help aviation leaders and stakeholders understand not only what's really going on, why it's happening, and what they can do about it. In this episode, we're addressing the March 19 announcement of route cuts by JetBlue. Now, JetBlue isn't profitable. It hasn't been since 2019. New CEO Jerona Garrity has made it clear she intends to return JetBlue to profitability with an inward focus as opposed to by alliance and mergers like her predecessor. That means she has to do three things, which we'll review in ascending order of difficulty. First, cut the laggard routes that have no hope of contributing value to the network, whether by direct route profitability or by providing some other network benefit worth investing in. And please note, they can only invest in so many of those opportunities when the overall network is so unprofitable. Second, improve the profitability of remaining routes. In some cases, as we'll see shortly, this means cutting flying on co-terminal routes to bolster the profitability of the more important station in the co-terminal market. In other cases, it may mean reduced frequency and or higher fares. And finally, and most difficult of all, find new opportunities that will be quickly profitable. For the balance of our time today, we're going to look primarily at cuts with a nod to one cut that illustrates how JetBlue can improve at least one route's performance in a co-terminal market. Now, to do this, we use one of our actionable intelligence products we call EPIC, which stands for the Evaluation of Profitability of Itineraries and Carriers. And EPIC uses publicly available data to allocate costs and revenue to airline segments the same way that airlines do it to determine the profitability of a carrier and its routes at any given airport. As you'll see, using EPIC, we could actually have predicted with a high degree of success which routes JetBlue would have cut yesterday. And therefore, as this is not likely to be the last of JetBlue cuts, we believe we know which remaining routes are most at risk. But getting back to what has already happened, let's first look at Fort Lauderdale. JetBlue is not profitable at Fort Lauderdale, but the losses are narrow on a margin basis. And as we'll see shortly, they are in a stronger position here than they are in Boston and JFK. If JetBlue can make algebraic gains to get Fort Lauderdale quickly to profitability, the benefits to the network are probably geometric. As we can see, the announced Fort Lauderdale cuts are the worst five JetBlue performers at Fort Lauderdale by operating margin, and yet they are still mainly tactical in nature. None of these routes is really strategic to JetBlue at Fort Lauderdale, and they only by getting rid of them cut their Fort Lauderdale losses in half, assuming no ill effects on traffic to the remaining routes. That means that unless JetBlue's financial performance at Fort Lauderdale improves substantially on their remaining routes, more and more strategic cuts loom, which brings us to LAX. JetBlue is actually marginally profitable at LAX. The routes they're cutting are three of the four worst performers at LAX by margin, and the bottom three in terms of overall profit and loss. LAX Miami actually isn't too bad, but by cutting it, JetBlue probably believes they can improve the performance of LAX to Fort Lauderdale, a co-terminal route, which is one of their profitable LAX routes. All other things being equal, without these four routes, JetBlue improves itself considerably at LAX. While not prosperous, they increase their margin by 3 percentage points and a nominal profit annually of 27 million improvement. And again, we'd expect performance of LAX Fort Lauderdale to improve without having to compete against Miami service on their own metal. So there could be other beneficial effects to the LAX franchise as well. Not bad for a day's work. Which brings us to Kansas City. Now, this is a textbook example of a city that not only loses money for an airline, but has no clear path to improvement and serves no real strategic purpose on their network. Now, to be clear, we're not bashing Kansas City or JetBlue here in any way. But given the geopolitical and demographic forces that are incentivizing U.S. airlines to fly less in order to make more, performance like this will not survive, whether it's at Kansas City or elsewhere, and whether it's JetBlue or someone else. And especially with JetBlue, when we look at the performance of their two Kansas City routes relative to their performance at those focus cities, it becomes clear why they did this. First, Boston, where JetBlue is not profitable and needs to figure out a way to become profitable quickly given their investment in it. Kansas City was an easy place to start, note our verb choice, because amongst year round mainline JetBlue routes, it had the worst operating margin and close to the worst P&L. The routes below Kansas City in P&L are, with one exception, all ones we believe JetBlue considers strategic from Boston and therefore are resistant to cuts for now. But as cutting Kansas City only closes a few percentage points of JetBlue's operating loss at Boston, more Boston cuts and to larger markets are likely in store unless JetBlue can improve Boston profitability quickly. And it's a similar story at JFK. As with Boston, amongst year round mainline JetBlue routes, Kansas City had the worst operating margin. The one grade out below Kansas City is not a mainline route. And amongst the worst P&L. So this was a relatively easy decision for JetBlue leadership to make. As with Boston, cutting Kansas City will only improve JFK margins and P&L a couple of percentage points, meaning more JF cuts almost certainly loom unless they can figure out a way to get JFK to profitability quickly. Well, so after all this, the question you might ask is, so what? Well, the point of actionable intelligence is to find signal in the noise of all the aviation data and then act on that signal in time to affect your outcomes. Using JetBlue as a case study, the first thing we'd want to know if we ran an airport that is a spoke to a JetBlue focus city would be, how profitable is JetBlue at my airport? How close am I to being in the next round of their cuts? This is what Epic tells us. And if I'm in jeopardy, what's the root cause? For instance, what are the PDUs on their routes through the end of last month? What's their market share? Using actionable location intelligence, or product we call Ally, we can actually know this now through February of 2024. And then once we know the performance and its root causes, what actions can you take to improve results in time to affect what we call your air service destiny? Maybe your airport is a JetBlue spoke city, or you see the value of knowing how successful your carriers are at your airport, or you're an industry analyst who wants to provide better insight to your audience than what you can get from other sources, then please contact me, ESW at signalaviationconsulting.com. I'd love to talk with you. Otherwise, until next time, I'm Edward Shelswell White, encouraging you to keep looking for the signal in the noise.